Istanbul for Lab Week. So we're just gonna wait 1 second to make sure everything's rolling smoothly. All right, Filecoin Plus Day. Welcome everybody, thank you for being here as part of Lab Week 23. We have some remote attendees, some virtual attendees that will be joining us. So happy that you could be here. We are going to be taking live questions a little bit, but mostly we want to hold all of our questions until the end. So there is a form. You can go ahead and open this form now. We'll show this QR code a couple more times. Submit your questions throughout the different talks, and then at the very end of the presentations, we'll do a set of Q&A. High level, we're gonna kick off sort of what is the Filecoin Plus program. A lot of you already know that, but it is a reminder to, what is the program scope? What has changed? What are some of the new sort of parameters? Then we're gonna mostly be hearing about that from Deep Kapoor. He'll be joining remotely. After that, I'll be back up to really give you a high-level summary of this new V5 notary election cycle. This is a thing that a lot of work has been put into. We're gonna go over the application form, the rubric, talk about some samples. We'll then hear from Phil on our team about open source tooling, KZ on sort of compliance and how these new pathways will handle that, RG on disputes, how these pathways will have to respond to different dispute issues, and then the plan will be to hear from K-Ray, who will be remote in all the way from California, if we can get him, to talk about sort of the community ownership and how the governance systems work. And then, like I said, we will then click over to Q&A. So at this point, we're going to see if we can phone a friend and dial in Deep. This is gonna work, I believe it. I know, sadly, too many deep jokes. And
are you able to hear us?
Oh yeah.
Okay, we're. I'm getting a little bit of that from guys. This is annoying there. You're gonna be looking extremely sharp.
Thank you. So do you. A little blurry in the background though.
Okay, let me try and pass it a little bit, and then there's also lights on the screen. You run slides for me, guys?
Yeah, I think I'm running slides for you.
Awesome, good. Okay, welcome everybody to Filecoin Plus Day. Super excited to have you here. This is one of the beautiful, and really glad to have all of you that engaged. I'm sure not everybody's dressed as well as Galen is, but he sets a high bar, so aspire to that the next time I'm doing one of these. I will make my segment here pretty short. I'd love to chat with you a little bit about principles and scope, so you know sort of the latest, a little bit of where we came from, and what the overall founding
Okay, Deep, we're gonna have you share your screen. Can you do screen share for the slides, and then you'll drive them through Zoom?
Yes, I should be able to do that. Give me a hot second.
Great.
Um,
We're distributed.
yeah, we're making this work. Okay, do you see this?
Not yet.
Okay, let me know. Actually, let me go to a different slide so that you can see. I see it in the production side that I'm looking at the clock. Okay.
Yeah, give us 1 second. All right, trying to advance. Here we go.
Does that work?
Yeah, I think we see FIP3.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so hopefully you caught some of what I opened with. I don't really want to repeat it because I think you're all quite familiar with some of this stuff too at this point. What I would like to do is just spend 30 seconds talking about the history of the Fill Plus program just a little bit. So for those of you that don't know this, Fill Plus launched around the time of mainnet with FIP 03, 0003, and it set forth the overall principles for the program as well as an initial read of some of the mechanisms of how it was end up changing. And so the program includes several different components that many of you would know, while the implementation of them has continued to evolve, the overarching principles have remained the same. What are these principles? So we set forth with 7 initially. The first of which is decentralization and diversity, with the intent that we build governance mechanisms and we build a community that is distributed and decentralized, comes from a variety of different backgrounds and shares the Filecoin network in common, shares the goals of the success of the Filecoin network in common, the desire to work towards making the blockchain network as useful as possible, but may come from many different paradigms and perspectives. We want transparency and accountability. We want the work to be open. Every discussion, every topic, every issue happens in a place where other people can access it. For those of you that know this, we track everything in GitHub. We have bi-weekly governance calls that you're welcome to dive into, and you can check out the recordings on YouTube anytime. Community-based governance, which means everybody's engaged in the decision-making process and can and has the option to have a say in influencing the outcomes of changes to the program as well as changes to meta-governance as well. And it's been awesome to see a steady increase in engagement on this front over the last 3 years. Low-cost dispute resolution. The idea here was to get to something where we could easily and quickly raise issues with the program design, or with the implementations of the program design, or with actors that were exercising their rights within the implementation of the program design. And we'd like to continue to double down on that because it's become a really important area of focus, and you'll be hearing a lot from other folks over the course of today on this. Limited trust earned over time. Ultimately, Fill Plus is a social trust-based program. You'll hear us on this from Galen and Phil that are coming after me on this bright and exciting agenda. But what you should understand about this is in the world of social trust, even though we're implementing in a P2P trustless environment, we need to come up with something that allows for people to earn reputation, to prove that they're here in an incentive-aligned way to deliver useful outcomes. And so remember this as a tenet, as well as you go about thinking about the things that we're proposing that we talk about today, because I think it will drive some of the assumptions that are being made, as well as some of the core tenets of the designs that are being proposed. There was a goal to get to ensuring that service terms were transparent. Both sides of the marketplace knew where the other side was and could make assumptions reasonably based on what to expect from it. And ultimately, and surely not at least, is getting to a really useful storage network. This is ultimately the goal of the Fill Plus program, is to ensure that the storage use case and other use cases of Filecoin as well, but really the storage use case ends up actually adding some kind of utility to the world and having a positive impact. The program has a pretty broad scope overall. We define this as designing for all client actors with quality data that engage in distributed onboarding. There are 3 key aspects of the statement.
We've got all client actors, which I'll touch on in a second. We've got quality data, which I'll also define for you. And then we've got distributed onboarding. And these are basically the core pillars that drive how we consider whether or not something falls in scope for going through the Fil Plus processes and getting access to the resource data cap that we circulate in the current implementation and mechanisms of the Fil Plus program. It is extremely important to highlight that Fil Plus is not focused on what we call CC sectors in the Filecoin network, or just basically hardware-only use cases for Filecoin that aren't ultimately storing some kind of storage or serving some kind of utility. We're not interested in supporting some kind of gaming or spam for the sake of earning more block rewards. And we're strictly not supportive of any closed-loop Sybil. To define that a bit better, we mean we actively want to work towards mechanisms and system designs that restrict the ability for an individual entity or actor to operate in a variety of different capacities in the network that results in them getting unfair advantages or disproportionate outcomes. So let's talk about all clients. So we defined this all client actors in the slide before. What does this actually mean? It means anybody that is a data owner or a data preparer, so plays some kind of role in the preparation of data or contributes data that could be stored to the Filecoin network. It is somebody that can provide some kind of KYC and or KYB information to help earn social trust and establish themselves as a known actor and a known quantity, or can provide some kind of long-term commitment to being here for the right reasons in the network. And so that is to say, we want to serve all client actors that are legitimate actors. And in order to establish yourself as a legitimate actor, you can either prove yourself through existing norms around legitimacy in the world that we exist in right now, or prove that you are long-term committed to the network and your incentives are aligned with that of the program. Quality data. This has been a relatively complex subject, and we've really got to unpack this for the community quite a bit over the last 6 months, which has been great. The current definition, which you can access anytime for yourself at filplus.storage, states that quality data includes content that meets local regulatory requirements and the data owner wants to see on the network. So this could include private and encrypted data. So as long as the actual source of the data is interested in having it stored on the network, that should check out regardless of what the type of data is, unless the source actually doesn't have rights over that data being distributed. So we say it's open and retrievable. So you've got data that might be coming from non-governmental organizations or research labs that's explicitly tagged as something that can be redistributed without licensing, and that is in scope for onboarding to the Filecoin network via the Fil Plus programs. The third category is really maybe data that isn't necessarily serving any kind of utility itself through its storage, but rather indirectly serving utility to the entire Filecoin network. And so if you're onboarding to the Filecoin network, even if it's small amounts of junk data, because you're able to prove something through a proof of concept or able to show a new utility of the network, which is storage adjacent, then it's worthwhile that you get some access to subsidized data onboarding because you're able to prove out something that can hopefully unlock significant utilization of the network over time for storage purposes. And then the last bit that we need to talk about is distributed onboarding, right? So we touched on what client actors are. We've talked about what quality data is defined as. And so let's talk about distributed onboarding. We generally define this currently as data onboarding to the Filecoin network that comes in multiple physical locations and across multiple storage provider entities to serve client requirements. And so this is inferring to some extent what a client would actually want, a storage client would actually look for in a sustainable, useful storage use case. And this typically means we don't want to see data onboarded to the network that the client is okay with, just disappearing or just being lost, or isn't to some extent following some kind of like durability or availability requirements. And a good way for us so far to infer that has been, hey, is this client actually working with different storage provider entities? Is this data actually being stored across multiple data centers, ideally in multiple physical locations? So the likelihood of that data being disappeared is extremely low. Well, hopefully that was a good initial explainer on some of the scope and principles of the Fil Plus program. Really, the program has evolved quite a bit since its initial inception. We've learned a lot about ways in which we can more efficiently deliver mechanisms to scale utilization of the Filecoin network. The scope of the program has also continued to grow. It started out as being very focused on open data, but lately, Actually, not that lately. Over the last 18 months, it's definitely increased in taking on private encrypted data as well and serving all different types of legitimate use cases on the network. I think future iterations of the program will continue to support this wider scope because that's really how we'll get Filecoin to the next level of serving some kind of useful impact to the rest of the world. And so we look forward to operating with keeping these core principles in mind, these core tenets for design systems that actually make sense for Filecoin and for the rest of the network. Multi-sided marketplaces are difficult to design for. And so please remember these things as you go about hearing some of the content today that looks for opportunities to do this in the most positive way possible, in the most opportunistic way possible without opening up doors for potential abuse or profiteering within these systems. We, as a community, all of you that are listening to this, whether you're here live or you're watching this recording, have a duty to ensure that the Filecoin network ends up being as useful as possible. So let's work together to deliver that. With that, I'm going to transition this back to Galen. Thanks, Galen, for having us in. Again, sorry we couldn't be there in person today, but happy to take some questions here. And Phil and I are dialing in remotely from Barcelona right now. Hello from Spain. We'll be engaged through the course of the day today if anything comes up.
Deep, that was amazing. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, tech team. Thank you so much. We are going to hold questions and use that questionnaire form, so we're going to shift gears now. So we'll just switch over this presentation deck in 1 second, and I'm going to take it from here and introduce this notary election V5 structure. So we've had a couple of these notary elections now. Yeah, it's going to be a doozy. Get ready. All right. But where are we? Like, before we jump into that, the program has done pretty well in the past 2 years. We have gotten to 1.8 exabytes of published verified storage deals. That is not just the amount of data cap that we have created, that is the amount of published deals that we have brought to the network. Our average time to data cap in the 95th percentile is at 3 days. This means that we are on average getting to a 3-day SLA of getting people data cap. As they are applying, we are responding to them and delivering that data cap in a way that works. We have 39 active notaries in the past 2 weeks out of 86. This is an area of growth for us, but the program is growing and scaling. We have had some major updates. These are just some big ones that we have hit in the past year around new bots. You have heard about some of these earlier today. You have encountered them. They work very well most of the time, and sometimes they're down. The CID checker bot reads across all of these different deals to see how is data being distributed. What can we infer from that? We have then built in some retrieval bots to say, great, now let's go try and do retrieval testing. If this was supposed to be available, let's ping those storage providers and find out. We are almost to the point of launching a new aggregator and compliance bot, the AC bot. This is going to aggregate a lot of data sources and check for compliance on these open client issues and say, across this range of quantitative metrics, is your application compliant with your stated program goals? Yes or no? And then we can start to force close those issues more rapidly and effectively. We have a new client landing page. Deep mentioned that. That came with new UX and UI application forms to decrease kind of client lift in being able to apply for data cap more quickly. That was another thing that helped us hit that 3-day SLA. We've added tooling for notaries to do saved diligence replies. We've updated the notary registry front end. We had an issue with load times. We're updating the back end. This has been a huge overhaul to go off of what were just issues and now moving towards a code base in JSON and PRs. This is going to further increase consistency and reliability. It's been a major investment. We're getting Slack community moderation tools. We've worked with 2 different outside third-party vendors for KYC and KYB. We've built custom integrations for those. We are working on automated client data cap deletion proposals to the root key holders, and we have increased the amount of translation services that we are offering across our services, including the notary governance calls, to try and bring in more of our community. This has been a very big year for us. But we have built one main highway, and this is the large data set highway. And that one main highway has allowed us to get to that 1.8 exabytes of data cap. If you look at this section here, we are splitting out the different streams. We need to build more pathways. We need to encourage teams to build more pathways. And we need these pathways to be more specialized. So the new V5 notary election cycle, they will still be notaries. We are starting to use this new term of allocators to help create this differentiation of how this is a new way of thinking about these compared to the previous 4 election cycles. These are people, teams, organizations, working groups who are going to apply to be a notary allocator. They will need to design, propose, and implement the end-to-end ownership of their pathway. So if we go back here and we look, these LDN notaries, we have built a lot of tooling to make this more consistent. But it breaks down when we have what we could think of as one toll booth with 80 different attendants at those toll booths. And all 80 of those attendants have different ways of interpreting the rules. And they are trying to work together and filter out all of the traffic that is coming to them. The goal here is to break out those roads, get teams to build those to be more specialized, and get those toll booths to be closer together and more in sync. So that a team could say, we are going to work with a certain type of client, and we are going to work with that client in a certain way. High-level overview, we have launched an update. This is going to link you to a section on our GitHub README where you will find more information. It's going to be the information that we're covering in this talk. We will update that README page, and we will continue to link to it with more documents as they come. But high level, applicants are going to submit a form on GitHub, just like they have always done to become a notary. They are also going to submit an Airtable form, which is something that we launched last year. The governance team will be reviewing and providing feedback. This is going to be a collaborative process. We don't expect these teams to nail it the very first time they submit their application. So as we go into Q1, the governance team will be working with these applicants to revise all of their information that they're putting in. We'll post those scores publicly, we will announce the selections, and then in Q1 we will be ratifying these new teams. By Q1 and Q2, we will be sunsetting the large data set notary as it exists currently. We will be launching these new notary allocator pathways, and then we will move into a rolling application cycle so that new teams that are coming to our community don't need to wait a year to apply to become a notary. If you are a team that is building some way to fit into the Filecoin Plus ecosystem, we don't want you to have to wait or fit into someone else's pathway. We want to get you to apply right away. We want to work with you on that application, and we want to start giving you data cap that you can allocate to your clients to see what works. So there's going to be one application per pathway. This is going to be different for different teams. Some working group teams may submit multiple applications because they are designing multiple pathways. They will do this in GitHub. It will collect basic demographic information. We have created a Google Doc that you will make a copy of for editing. This is so that you can work offline, you can work with your team async. It's going to be a long application form. I believe it's about 60 questions. You will then take that Google Doc set of questions and drop them into Airtable. You have to submit this through Airtable because it is what is going to allow the governance team to score these more effectively, efficiently, consistently, and manage that data. So we want to give you a low-lift way to get started, get into a Google Doc and see all of the questions that are going to be there. These things are live. And then start to build your answers to this, work with the team to revise it, submit your form. Certain sections of that form will be pushed back to GitHub for community transparency. This was a very important part that Deep talked about of our mission goals. We want all of the community to see all of these pathways that are being proposed because the governance team is going to make these decisions with the community about which ones we want to approve. So there is a section on this Airtable form regarding final additional disclosures. That will remain private on the Airtable form. That will live with the Filecoin Foundation and the governance team. It will not be pushed back to GitHub. This is all explained on the forms. I just want to make sure we're covering it as we jump in. There will be a public rubric that you will be scored against. You will see that rubric. You will see it as you're making your application. You will be able to see it as you get scored. We don't want this to be surprising. We don't want this to seem like it is somehow inequitable or that we are making these decisions in a black box. So to give some examples as we launch, an automated notary. One of these already exists. It's phenomenal. We love it. Glyph built it. It's great. They may continue to maintain it. They may not. That will be up to them. If they do not, another team absolutely can and should step up and build it. And we want more teams to build more automated notaries. We will use this as an example throughout the talk. All that it does to check diligence, to confirm that a client is eligible, is it says OAuth in with your GitHub account. If your GitHub account is a certain age and has not worked with this notary before, it will give you data cap. It has no requirements for the data, and it has no requirements for distributed deal making. That is in scope because it was transparently communicated why this notary exists. This notary exists to do tutorials, to allow people to try this process, get a small amount of data cap, and go make 1 or 2 deals. That should not be gated on some extreme lift of diligence. There can be more automated diligence mechanisms, and there should. This is just one example that uses one metric. Open data sets will be another example that we will be pushing. The large data set notary started here. This is what it is going to evolve into. As I mentioned, the large data set notary as it exists right now will be sunset when these are being ratified. And in its place, a Fil Plus working group team is going to take on this open data set highway. It will be a manual diligence process. The data will have to be open and retrievable. In certain ways, it will look very similar to the LDN process as it exists now, but it will be a tighter pool of signers. It will be a more tightly scoped set of rules, and there will be more information about how do we define retrievability, how do we define compliance. And the team building this will be the ones setting those parameters, not the active pool of all 86 notaries. This is a very important difference in how we are moving away from the V4 and the LDN cycle and into a new V5 model. The team that is proposing, owning, and responsible for this data cap highway will be the ones setting up those rules. They will set them up in their application form. They will be clearly communicated to the community. And they will be held to that standard throughout. Another example is similar to one that also exists right now, the eFil Plus pathway for enterprise and encrypted data. The difference here between the open dataset pathway, this has higher upfront diligence. It requires more KYB information. If you are showing up claiming to be a data owner of private encrypted enterprise scale data, you need to be able to pass a higher bar of diligence to prove that. And then you can start to earn data cap trust, and then you can start to onboard that data. And if you are meeting your compliance within this pathway, you will be able to continue. The sets of questions, the type of diligence, the types of data are different across these 3 pathways. And one size does not fit all. The type of client that wants to work with the enterprise pathway should expect a longer time to first data cap, because they are dealing at enterprise timescales. So it is reasonable for us to design these pathways and to create new metrics for how they are successful. And another form that we are really excited to push, and there are some teams building this, are market-based mechanisms. One of them is a market-based clearinghouse. And in this, there may be more minimal client diligence up front, some amount of algorithmic software checking of the data that would be held in a clearinghouse, and then bidding between clients and SPs. And as you set up these economic incentives to say, we can prevent one closed loop Sybil by creating downward bidding pressure. It would not be economically advantageous. I would be bidding against myself if I were trying to play both sides of this market. And so in that way, we may not need to do as much KYB. We may not need to do as much data diligence because we have other ways of ensuring that this is within scope and not someone attempting to be a closed loop or game the system. So again, these are some examples of types of allocators that we are going to talk about and use throughout this. So Deep mentioned the program scope. All clients with real quality data doing distributed deal making. This is the overall umbrella that still applies to these different allocator pathways. The goal here is to ask qualitative information when you need to, and then scale your trust as you verify over time. It is not reasonable to expect that you could design a perfect pathway where you would not get it wrong, where you would be able to ask enough information or know with full confidence that every decision you make is someone in scope. So the goal here is ask some amount of information and explain to us what you will ask and how you will then verify over time. What are you going to ask of your clients? How much are you going to trust them? And then how will you verify it as it regards to who your clients are, what data you support, and your definition of distribution. So, identify and perform diligence, make sure that the client is compliant to your pathway. And again, you are setting your standards for who you are trying to work with. The data still must meet all local legal requirements because, again, that is a part of the overall program scope. Is it something that an owner is bringing to the table? Is it something that is open retrievable? Is it somehow a proof of concept? And then how is it distributed and not a closed loop civil? Another section of questions on this application that you need to be thinking about are around allocations, tooling, and risk mitigation. The principles here really are around consistency, excellence, and equity. You need to set clear standards and processes. If we build a pathway and we give you 5 petabytes of data cap for you to allocate out to your clients, how are you going to structure those allocations? Will you set a programmatic, consistent rule that says, I will only ever give 10 TIBs at a time? And you could justify why that is the case, what types of clients you would work with, and that is your allocation strategy. If you are then ratified and onboarded, and some number of months down the line, you give out 100 TIBs of data cap, you are not in compliance with your stated allocation strategy. So the goal here is think about what your pathway is going to do and set that as your rules. Then how do you utilize tooling to increase efficiency, keep things in compliance, and increase transparency? And this is an area where I want to double down. Oops, whoops. The Fil Plus working group with myself, the foundation, members of PL, we're going to be working on publishing some kind of a catalog of all of the different open source tools that we have built. I mentioned on one of the earlier slides all the things that we have accomplished this year, the retrieval bot, the CID checker bot. How do you plug into those tools? How do you take advantage of those tools? How do you stay in sync with any updates? How do you customize them? How do you build your own tooling and ship that to the community? And then as far as risk mitigation, disputes will exist. We are building these pathways, and there will be disagreements. That is reasonable and to be expected. A dispute is basically some kind of disagreement with an allocator's decision. This may be an internal dispute. An allocator pathway may say, this client does not qualify. We will not give them data cap. We will close their application. And that client may disagree. How will they raise a dispute with you? What evidence should they present? What is your process? What is your equitable way for them to challenge your decision? Or you may say, I gave you some amount of data cap, you didn't use it correctly, I am not going to give you any more data cap, I am going to close this and I'm going to give you a black mark on your record. You may disagree with that as a client. How do you raise that dispute? They may also be external, and this is where we have seen a lot of interesting issues, and we'll talk more about this later. The allocator to the governance team or the allocator to another allocator may enter into a dispute where the governance team may say, allocator, we disagree with your decision to either give data cap or deny, and you as a pathway, as a team who is building this highway, as somebody responsible for the toll booth, you need to defend your decision to either let those cars through or not. Provide evidence. Show how you are still in compliant or not. So the goal here is to think about what is your process for filing, for arbitration, and for seeking resolution of these disputes that will come up. You will not be having to do this alone. Again, the Filecoin Foundation and the Filecoin Plus governance team will be working with you in support of these. We want equity. We want this pathways to be specific and specialized, but we want them to be equitable and not exclusionary. And in that regard, if a pathway is found to not be serving some user group, but we also don't have another pathway for it, then let's stand one up. The goal here is let's create more of these specialized highways, not try and change the highway to fit everyone's needs. Last set of questions on the application form are around monetization, reputation, and your disclosures. And the thing to keep in mind here is transparency. Monetization is relatively new. You are operating in an economic and service-based model. Filecoin is a two-sided marketplace. And a notary, an organization who is building one of these allocator pathways, you are providing a service that is necessary to the growth of the Filecoin network. That service can be monetized. We are seeing teams that are talking about having application fees. They may do those in some way in Phil. They may state where they will handle their bookkeeping and what their fee structure would be. They may set up smart contracts for that. And they may take a small application fee that covers their diligence checks. And as a result, they are increasing their monetization and revenue to be able to say, we can now hire a contractor to help us review all of the applications that come in. That is a reasonable service to state clearly up front. We are also seeing different monetization strategies around staking collateral or slashing when a client or a storage provider is found to be out of compliance with your pathway, or adding fees into some system. If you are a market-based system where you are having this bidding engine where clients are putting their data into a clearinghouse and bidding on their data and storage providers are bidding to win that, you may take a cut of those fees. And if these things are transparent, recorded, and equitable, that is a reasonable system, just like a toll booth is capturing money for everyone to use that bridge. This has been a sticking point for some of our notaries and some people in the community for a while. So we are excited to see how people try to monetize and see what they propose. We want to hear from the community what they need in order to make this system work for them. And then with reputation, the governance team, the governance community has to do diligence on you as a entity wanting to be a notary. So we are asking questions about your previous history in the ecosystem. We are asking for your disclosures information because it is important to us to know who we are authorizing to be trusted fiduciaries in this network. So there's a lot of sections. Like I said, it's 60 questions, give or take. It is long. It should take you a reasonable amount of time to review this application, review your responses, workshop them. We want to see URLs. We want to see wireframes. We want to see your templates. We want to see forms that you're going to use. We want to see your Google spreadsheet bookkeeping. Be extensive in your application because you are proposing to run an entire end-to-end process that is driving 1.8 exabytes of published data. So once you have submitted that application, and as you are doing it, you will be able to see this public rubric. The sections on the rubric are mapped to every question. They have quantitative and qualitative rankings. Some of the questions are purely quantitative. How many storage providers will you require your clients to work with? Some of them are qualitative. Define your diligence process. You can read this rubric and say, I would like to score lower on this because I am not going to be able to meet that level of rigor and commit to that. But across these other categories, I am confident in the quality of my application. So there are 5 levels of scoring on all of these questions. You'll be able to review it, and there will be calculations based in these different sections that I went over. Up next, you're going to hear about some of that existing open source tooling. We've invested a lot of time and money and development teams into it. We want it to work for you. We want it to be customizable. We want you to utilize it. You're also going to hear about some of the ways that we are thinking about internal compliance, like I said, for your allocator system, as well as dispute resolution. And then lastly, we'll be closing off with hearing about some of the governance process and change mechanisms. As you are building this pathway, it is reasonable to think, once I have shipped this pathway, things will need to change. We said we were going to monetize at this scale, and that was not sustainable. We have a proposal for changing our pathway. We need to make that public, make it clear, and get it approved. You cannot just say that you are going to perform one kind of diligence, get approved, and then shift gears and not tell anyone. That would not be transparency. So we're going to go over those talks soon. Posting these again, the repo README, if you are here in person or watching this and have your phone out, that will direct you to the README file in GitHub. We'll be updating that as we go with different links. It has a checklist. It should be a useful resource for you. Then the other QR code here is to our question and answer form. We'll be capturing those and responding soon. We want this to be collaborative. Come to the governance calls and work with us. We're going to probably be standing up some office hours. We're going to try and hit different time zones for those, where you can work with the governance team and go through some of the questions on your application as you're filling it out. Again, this is new. This is more complicated. This is more robust. We do not want you to be immediately scared away, but we want to let you know this is not applying to just be on a multisig and push buttons on a ledger. You are doing a lot more work than that. We'll take a question with the mic live, so we have time.
Thank you. Sorry, loud. I just wanted to clarify, because I think that's a really important point you were just making there, which is this next notary election is actually a layer above where all of the previous notary elections have been, because previous notary elections have been individuals that want to step up as a member of the community within a specific allocator, like the large data notary allocator, which is just one of many. And now this is an application to create new allocators, like Banyan wants to create a different type of enterprise allocator where you can get audited as a company instead of going through KYB and having your data audited, which is cool and also a good allocator program. But I'm curious, for the evolution of the LDN allocator, which is going to become this open data allocator itself, is that also going to have a notary election or some open application process? Because I imagine a lot of people who in their heads are like, well, I've applied to be a notary in the last 4 notary elections, and now this 5th notary election is actually an entirely different type of application process than everything that I've been through before. I think it might be useful to very clearly route them somewhere else, because I would not expect the 89 existing notaries in the LDN process to all be good creators of new allocator pathways themselves. It takes a lot of design to actually create something that has good security guarantees, has incentives being balanced, is going to be effective at deploying this critical resource for the Filecoin community. And so I think by calling it a notary election, we are creating some confusion that we need to very clearly route around to mitigate having 89 people try and propose allocator systems that are not going to be the high quality applications that you're looking for.
Yeah, so I think the question is around how do we take the existing community members that still want to be active and involved and help wayfind them into something that might look more similar to what they are used to, but they are not at the level where they want to propose an entire new pathway that they have end-to-end ownership over. And I think one of the things is not yet. Because when we make this transition, one of the big goals that we want is for that open data sets pathway to have higher efficiency, higher specialization, and more ownership of their pathway. And one of the issues that we have run into consistently with the LDN process is taking 89 disparate actors that have very different engagement levels, definitions of what is compliant, ownership in the network, investment in SLA metrics, and we have put all of them into a toll booth side by side. And the problem is we will see applications come in and a certain subset of those notaries will consistently be much more engaged than others. And so the goal being, rather than saying, let's take this new team that is building this highway and include some of that overhead of now onboarding these people to their new tooling that may look similar, but they are owning it and building it. We want this nucleated team to own that at first and have the ability to then say, we are now going to expand and include new signatories in our pathway. And here is our mechanism for how we will bring on signers as contractors or as project partners or as whatever they want to call them to be helping facilitate their pathway. But that notary entity, that working group, is the one that is ultimately responsible for it. And I think that what we will see is we will see some of these different notaries want to still get engaged, and as we get into Q2 and Q3 of next year, then it's a question of, great, what of the notary allocators that we approved need support or could use scaled support, and how do we onboard these people into those roles without needing to have them build their own pathway or distill the efficiency of an existing pathway. Nope.
Microphone. So the current LDN process, which has been playing that role in the Phil Plus community, I think you'd said, and I just want to remind myself, is that's going to be sunset and replaced by these other new allocator pathways in the Q2, Q3 timeframe. Is that right?
One,
and current notaries.
The time frame for the sunsetting and the rolling over is going to be Q1, Q2. When we ratify the new batch of V5 notaries on chain, when the root key holders are requested to give data cap to these new allocators, the goal is that one of those new allocators that gets approved is an open data set allocator, and that one of them is an eFill allocator, and that one of them is an automated allocator. That when those come on board, we will also, once they have connected to the tooling and maybe we give a week or two to make sure things are working, we will then deprecate the LDN multisig that is a single on-chain address that acts as a registered notary that has 80 some odd signers. That address will have its remaining data cap removed, and different dashboards and tooling will then point to these new places.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Of course. I think we are going to move into this next section, which is going to be another one of our virtual remote speakers. So we're going to take a second to get them connected. While we are getting them connected, again, as you have questions, fill out that form. Phil, great to see you. Thanks for joining.
Hello.
Let's see if we can hear you. Yes, we got you.
Can you hear me all right? All right, sweet. All right. Thank you, Galen, for that talk. That was a very good explanation on the meta pathways and the new Phil Plus allocator structure. My name's Phil. Like the rest of the people here, I work on Phil Plus, and like Deep, I am calling from Barcelona, thus the Zoom camera. So I want to allude to previously what Galen said, which was this allocator election is a whole new ballgame. It's not exactly the same thing as applying as a notary. And the barriers to entry to this it's much higher. So today I just want to talk about the few tools that we have been developing for the LDN pathway itself, that in the future, or actually in the very near future, you as an allocator or people who hope to become allocators can use in order to make their allocator lives much easier. So there's a lot to go through in here, and we've been working on this for many months leading up to this. And so, yeah, let's get to it. Okay. So the first tool I want to talk about is the aggregation and compliance bot, or the AC bot for short. The AC bot does what it says in its name. It aggregates multiple data sources together. So different things like retrieval bot data, CID checker data, data about the client's SPs, data about the geolocation of the client's SPs, pools that into one place, and then uses a set of logic to decide whether to intervene on a client's application or not. So this is probably the bigger tool out of all the other tools because it is expected to launch the soonest, and it will probably, if you are a client or an SP in the LDN process, it will probably be the one with the most immediate effect to you. In fact, it is expected to launch on the 24th of November. And after that date, we will start posting warning comments if you fail some of the thresholds for the AC bot. Now, you might be wondering, what are these thresholds? How do we comply to the AC bot? When it comes out, am I, as a client, am I screwed? Is this whole thing gonna go down? Yeah, so all this information is up on the issues. In short, for this AC bot design, we did not, of course, we wanted to keep this as decentralized as possible and as neutral as possible. We did not just think of numbers out of nowhere. Many of the thresholds for the AC bot, this logic that the AC bot goes through, it was simulated. We checked different parameters that the AC bot could use and then simulated them on the SP or the client landscape today. So for example, one is retrieval bot testing. So the AC bot takes retrieval bot data and then checks clients and the SPs they make deals with to see if they are compliant with retrieval bot testing. If the number of SPs or the number of deals they make fail this retrieval threshold, then we can go into data cap intervention. How we thought of that threshold is we did many simulations. So in this post issue 986, you can see many different graphs on this different simulations, how we thought of the thresholds, and we want this to be developed in the open. So if you have any objections or comments towards that, please comment in 986. If you're a client or SP and you want to figure out how will this affect me in the immediate term, like what can I do to comply, 989 is your best bet. It tells you the launch schedule. It also tells you the process that you have to do. One big thing that you have to do pretty immediately after the launch is that we will be requiring you guys as a client to provide an updated list of the SPs you're working with, because this list is, we want to check this list that you're actually working with the SPs you claim to be working with. We realize that a lot of clients have a history of switching their SPs multiple times, which could be a sign of non-compliance to the guidelines, right? So this is expected, again, to launch November 24, which is very near. And yeah, you'll hear upcoming news. There will probably be another proposal. If you want to learn more information about this, 989, 986, and 976 are your best bets. Okay, on to the next. So the next update is not the most impactful, but it's also the biggest one in terms of development. This has been worked on for multiple months by the Keiko team. This is the data cap application flow tooling update, or internally we like to call it the JSON update. Why? Because there's many components to this tooling flow update. The main one is the JSON tooling update. So what that means is that today we track data cap applications through issues, and we would have comments to track the state or the status of this issue. So let's say you are on your first tranche, a new comment would appear, and then someone signs this new tranche, another comment will appear, and so on. Very quickly, we realized that this was one, buggy, two, unreliable, comments can be deleted, and three, it's just not exactly the best way to track things. So in this version of this new tooling update, we will be using JSON files instead of issues. So it's much more concrete, much more durable. And instead of using comments, we would be using PRs. So in order to, when someone signs the application, we have tooling that we created to create a PR into this JSON file, and these JSON files would be the source of truth for each application. Along with this JSON file change, of course, there's new processes, a new front end for notaries to sign things with. There is validation scripts on GitHub to check whether you are making the correct JSON file change. Most of the times it'll be done by tooling, so it'll be okay. But if you were to do it manually through the GitHub interface and you want to check whether it's correct or not, there are validation scripts for you. There's a whole backend that we had to create in order to do this. And mostly it's to check, have a singular place to check the blockchain. So we've run into multiple bugs with the current infrastructure in where people sign an application, it shows that they've received the data cap on GitHub, but they actually haven't on chain. So there's something wrong with our tooling there. And we created a dedicated backend for this to not happen. This backend would be in charge of checking the blockchain first, whether the message has gone through, and then write the comment on GitHub before to make sure everything is in sync and consistent. Of course, there's updates to SA-bot 2 to integrate with this new JSON change and everything along with it. All this information, it's very verbose right now, and it might not be flowing into your head right now. 988 is a really great issue with a lot of this information, along with the timeline and also the different components that are going to be updated. On top of that, if you don't want to read through this long, boring issue, there is a demo video by the talented software developer Charlie from the Keiko team. He demos through the whole flow of creating an application to having notary sign it, to having a gov team trigger it, to having notary sign it, and then all the way up to SA-bot re-triggering another allocation, and then the application being finished. Yeah, so that is a big tooling update. It completely changes the way how we track applications. It's much easier to track now because everything's in a JSON file and can track statistics way better. It's much more durable because you can't delete comments as easily. You can see PRs. And lastly, it is less buggy in general, hopefully. So yeah, after launch, the first thing you'll see is that whenever you create a new application on the LDN repo, instead of having things continue on that issue, you will see a link to a JSON file. And in that JSON file, you will see the progress of your data cap application instead. Right, so that is a long one, but that's it for the tooling update. On to the next. Another tool that we have that is already launched and have been working on and still working on for a long time is the retrieval bot. The retrieval bot is a bot responsible for pinging SPs to check whether their data is actually retrievable or not. Current methods is just a very small data sample. So we are working on further methods where we would require full retrievals in the future. These retrievals work by BitSwap, GraphSync, and HTTP. Statistics of this retrieval bot, you're able to see on the compliance.datacapstats.io. If you click on this link in the slide, it will show you a graph of like what is the distribution of how retrievable SPs are in our system. It's not great, but it is getting way better with a big push towards being more retrievable. All this data from the retrieval bot is already inputted into the AC bot, and the AC bot will use this data to enforce compliance and accountability in the systems. Yeah. So CID checker is also another data source that is being used by AC bot. The main focus of the CID checker is to look at different CIDs that clients are making deals with and check if these CIDs look fishy. What that could mean is if the CID is replicated between multiple clients, there's probably some weird data sharing scheme going on here. Is it properly replicated between SPs. Like if you're storing it with just one SP, that's not good. We want you to store it with 3 different SPs. And many other statistics, flags with CIDs are used by the CID checker to hold clients accountable. This is used by AC bot again for compliance reasons. And a lot of this data, again, is shown on the compliance.datacapstats.io, which you can check. There's this thing called the CID checker score, in which clients can see what CID checker score they have, what percentage of their CIDs are flagged, and what percentage of their CIDs are not flagged. Yep, so that's it for this one. DataCap stats dashboard. So this one doesn't really have much to say. We have a lot of 4 different DataCap stats dashboards. These dashboards are used to see the overall statistics of DataCap flow for different stakeholders. So datacapstats.io is for the general stakeholder. Compliance.datacapstats.io is for SPs and notaries. Clients of clients, and then notaries is mainly for notaries. And so if you want to play around and look at the statistics of the overall FilPlus system, this is a good place to go to. In the future, we would probably integrate this with the allocator pathway in different ways. We would have a tab for allocators instead of notaries. And then we can have think of different ways to show statistics about compliance, allocated compliance. Yeah. Right. So with all this being said and all these tools, you might be wondering, how does this relate to me? I want to apply as an allocator. How do I use these things? Yeah. So currently, it's not open source yet. In the very near future, on those launch dates, everything will be open source and will be integrated, can be integrated with. If you are an allocator and you want to use these tools to make your life easier, please reach out to anyone in the FilPlus team to get a sense of what each tool does. AC bot can be used by an allocator to check the compliance of their clients. The tooling change can be used to keep good bookkeeping, and also to be able to easily file this bookkeeping to us. So for example, if you just follow this JSON tooling change, you could track how your clients are getting data cap and what rate they're getting data cap in a JSON file. And this JSON file, you can just easily send it over to us for good bookkeeping and filing. Of course, Retrieval Bot and CID Checker, they do what they say in their names, which is check CIDs and do retrieval. So again, you can use them to check your clients, check your SPs, that they are doing the right thing. Yeah, so that's most of it. Again, if you are an allocator thinking of integrating with these things, please, please, please reach out. And yeah, that's about it for me. Thank you all for listening to me ramble about tools. Let me know if you have any questions.
Phil, I think we'll be getting questions in the Q&A form. We're going to leave that up for a second so people can open it. And I'm not sure if we have any live questions. Enjoy Barcelona. It was great to see you. Wish you could be here in person. Thank you.
Thanks. I wish I could be there too.
Catch you next time.
All right.
Coming up next, we're going to hear from KZ on compliance. I will just make sure if everybody that had questions got a chance to capture that. So I'll pass it over to KZ.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin. I work on the Filecoin Plus working group team. Actually, before I jump into the exciting topic of compliance, I'd love everyone to just stand up. You've been hearing a lot of information. Maybe just take 30 seconds. Everyone stand up, stretch a little bit. Yeah. There we go. We're throwing a lot of information at you today, so take a break. All right, sounds good. Thank you. So today, I would like to talk a little bit about FilPlus compliance, just to talk about currently what that means, where we've come from, and then for the allocators of the future, what it'll mean for you from the allocator level and for clients that you manage. So first of all, just an overview of compliance. What is compliance? Basically, to be compliant with something, is to be in accordance with established guidelines. Within Phil Plus, there are a set of guidelines. During the beginning of the talk, Deep had mentioned sort of the scope of the program, talking about any client with real data in a distributed way, right? This is sort of the general guidelines that would meet Phil Plus compliance standards. But that's a very broad term, and it's hard to hold compliance to that, right? So in the current ecosystem regarding data cap and allocation of data cap, compliance is meant to ensure we can regularly audit what's happening. We can do checks against the guidelines as they're set. And we can make sure everything is transparent from a notary and an allocator standpoint. So these are things that we use to help manage compliance within the program. Where we've been today, as you can imagine, as this program has evolved over the past few years, there's been a lot of iteration on what compliance is and how do we manage compliance. Initially, compliance was managed by our elected notaries. We brought in a group of elected fiduciaries to be responsible to check clients. Were they real? Was their data real? Was their use case a good use case for Filecoin? All these types of things. We asked them to be responsible to be checking and making sure it met the guidelines for Phil Plus. As you can imagine, as the program has grown and scaled significantly, that ask of notaries has become really, really hard for them to manage, right? The number of applications has increased exponentially. The requirements to check the applications and the data and the onboarding is a very manual and hard process. So to be able to look at geographic distribution, data distribution, SP entity distribution, retrievability, it's a huge task, and compliance has struggled a bit, right? So to track non-compliance, to enforce anything against what we would consider non-compliant in the community, it's a very manual process to review, and RG, my colleague, will go into some disputes after me. But as you can imagine, we've been focused on making compliance more efficient, more automated, finding ways to use tooling and on-chain data to manage this. And so what my colleague Phil just spoke about previously was all of the tooling that has been built in the last year, more or less, that enables us to take on-chain data and automatically compare it to what's happening with what a client said they were going to do in their application. So now, with the example of the AC bot, the aggregate and compliance bot, we'll be able to more efficiently and automatically check the compliance of data, of applications against the Phil Plus guidelines. So we're really getting to an exciting point where this tooling is going to help make compliance that much better. And moving forward, I want to talk about how compliance will impact allocators and the clients of the allocators. So first, let's talk about allocator level compliance. Essentially, how will you be able to comply with Phil Plus governance guidelines for data cap? So let's hypothetically say an allocator comes in, they're allocated 10 TIBs of data cap to give out to their clients as they see fit. As that data cap sort of decreases and runs out, before you receive another allocation of 10 TIBs of data cap, the governance team will be running, checks to see, are you doing what you said with the clients that you said? So we will do that in ways, questionnaires. It will be probably the main way that we'll do this in terms of confirming actions or matching the initial answers of your applications. So now we have more specific information that we can hold accountable these allocators to. We'll also be conducting periodic on-chain checks, like I mentioned. Now with the use of the AC bot and other tools that are in development, we're able to look at things like data cap allocation rates, amount of going to certain clients, types of data, all of these things we can measure against the guidelines of the Phil Plus program and hold these allocators accountable to what they said they were they were going to do with their allocator. And then we'll also be asking for essentially some sort of bookkeeping process. So as an allocator, how are you tracking all of the diligence and management of data and clients that you're maintaining? You need to have some sort of record book that you can share, showcasing this information about due diligence you've done on clients that you're onboarding, about the clients themselves, the SPs, where they're located. All of this information you should be able to have and present if needed to showcase that you're doing your own level of due diligence to manage your allocator at a high level to the Fil Plus guidelines. So this is sort of the first level of compliance that will be required for allocators to be thinking about as they start to fill out the applications and apply to become an allocator. The second piece will be client level compliance, and this is essentially what my team deals with today. So when we look at the applications of the LDN, for example, we're looking to see our clients complying with the guidelines set forth. And we do things like these types of checks listed here. And these are the type of questions you need to ask and that you'll be asked in the application of how are you going to check your clients, similar to the way that we're checking current clients in the system, right? What are your standards? What are your clearly defined parameters that you'll measure against? What sort of distribution, usage rates, what sort of trust levels will you build into your system? And how will you measure against those things? What mechanism or mechanisms will you build or use? Phil mentioned in the previous presentation some of the tooling that we have available. Will you be using tooling that's open sourcely available? Will you be creating your own tooling and mechanisms to manage and verify compliance of your clients? So you need to spell all this out in detail and let the community and the governance team know exactly what tools you'll be using to track and audit data cap distribution. And then finally, thinking about non-compliance. If you're finding clients that are coming into your allocator and they're not doing what they said, how are you going to deal with that? What sort of steps will you take to address or take away data cap from clients that are in your system? Now this is on your hands to manage, right? This is something that we deal with currently, like I mentioned, in the LDN. It's a very hard process to hold someone accountable to such broad guidelines. But as we're getting smarter and smarter about setting standards, ensuring everyone's collecting the proper information, we can now hold clients more accountable. You'll be looked on to do this within your allocator as well. So really that's it at a high level. We just want to make sure that everyone is thinking about this step in particular as part of the application process, because it's one of the key pieces. Meeting compliance standards is going to be held very highly from not only the governance team, but also the community. They'll have access to everything you're doing as well. So they'll be checking to make sure that everything is being met in terms of Fil Plus guidelines. In terms of next steps, I would recommend everyone to go through the application when it is released. All of the questions that I just posted and information that you need to be thinking about is available there. So as you go through the questions in the application, you'll get a better sense of what information you need to make available and what systems and mechanisms you'll need to produce to be able to manage compliance. So definitely review those questions in the application. This is a totally new process. We're asking for feedback, ideas, questions that you have. Let me know, let my team know, so that we can continue to iterate. We might need to make changes. We might need to make questions more specific, so that we can collect the information that will make compliance the level that we need it to be. So I think another thing you can also do is, as applications for allocators start coming in, you can start to review what other applicants are answering and maybe bounce ideas off or utilize tools or mechanisms that they're planning to use towards compliance. You can also use yourself. So definitely start to look at GitHub over the coming months, and you'll see examples of answers to the types of questions for compliance that you'll need to be accountable for. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Thank you for your time. If you have questions, feel free to drop it in the chat here. We can, in the QR code, we can answer at the end of the session. And again, thanks. We'll now turn it over to my colleague RG to talk about the topic of disputes.
Hi, everyone. So kind of following on compliance, we'll be talking about disputes. And so disputes, it's a very controversial topic, given that, we've talked about Filecoin Plus being a social layer, just as in the real world, whenever you have humans in the loop, you'll have disputes. And so this is kind of the overview, the thesis that we're working with. And so our goal is that we want to make the dispute process as streamlined as possible. So, bring more objectivity to the dispute process, and then also think about, define what the accountability mechanisms would look like. And so kind of like broadly, we define, when we think about disputes, it's a pretty loaded term, but we can broadly think about breaking down disputes into 3 stages. There's the process of like filing a dispute, there's the arbitration or the proceedings, and then there's settlement and consequence. So if you think about like a public court, there's a lot more steps, but broadly we can categorize them into these 3. And so far, we've been focused on the following 2. We have introduced some settlement and consequences with data cap removal tooling, but most of our efforts have been focused on filing disputes and the arbitration and proceedings. So in today's world, this is kind of what it looks like. You have the TNT dispute tracker. You can go and explore that here. But essentially, that's kind of like an open public way where people can open disputes and the community can track them. But we've gotten some good feedback, as we've experimented with this tracker over the last 6 months. Here are some of the things that we've learned from the dispute process we have in place currently. So just to highlight some of the points, a public dispute tracker is great, but clients are concerned about their privacy. There's also requests to essentially make the resolution or the arbitration process a bit more public, because a lot of that happens a lot of the times between the Gov team and the client or the person who opened the dispute. And so people would like to kind of like, be in like a court hearing room to understand, why the dispute happened and like understand the precedents so that in the future, when a dispute occurs, they can be better prepared. And finally, predefined consequences. This has been, there's been a lot of like debate about this and like, a lot of issues open that, what is the consequence? If someone was held guilty for abusing data cap, what are we going to do about it? And for the longest time, I think we've talked about, removal of notaries or punishing clients through notaries. But in the new process, we want to kind of define this a bit better. And so here are some examples of the disputes in the new system design. There could be a dispute between the allocator decision and criteria to allocate data cap to clients. There could also be disputes between the governance team and the allocator about like data cap limits and top-ups, as well as community members raising disputes based on public dashboards that we plan to have, similar to what we have today. And so our approach to dispute resolution, as we're thinking about it, it's like a work in progress. At the allocator level, our approach is to provide a guideline and a playbook to the allocators. We really want the allocators to be independent, and so the goal here would be for them to resolve the disputes between them and the clients as much as possible. But then, so that would require, we want to make sure that each allocator has a form or a way to capture disputes from their clients in the filing dispute bucket, and then also kind of specify which compliance standard are they violating. And on the other side, when we have gov team level disputes, we want to kind of define what are kind of like the standards for compliance and what are kind of like the mechanisms and verify compliance between the governance side and the allocator. A lot of this would be mentioned in the application that the allocator would put in. And so we still need to kind of like update this and make some improvements to this process. So the next steps are between now and December, while we are launching the applications for the allocators, will be focused on making sure that all allocators have a filing process while we define the arbitration and proceedings. So that will include experimenting with open source tooling to capturing disputes, as well as decentralized arbitration. This is an interesting topic broadly in Web3, if you're interested in it, as well as experimenting with voting tools and mechanisms in collaboration with allocators and community. So following this talk and this week, we will open discussion topics for arbitration and to get community input on what the consequences should be for allocators. The consequence just cannot be simply be removal of data cap. I think we want to kind of get community feedback to understand, what are the different consequences that allocators would like to see, because at the end of the day, we want to make this process as seamless as possible for the clients and the allocators, and have as minimal involvement as possible. So yeah, please look out for that. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. Next, we'll have KZ join us. I'll let Galen introduce them.
Awesome. Thank you, RG. We actually are going to phone another friend. We'll be dialing in K-Ray to join us and talk about community ownership and governance. We'll just take a second to get him. Should be connected in Zoom. Look at this office. Not in Barcelona, K-Ray. I'm sorry, but thank you for staying up late and joining us in, so I'll let you take it away.
Oh, pleasure's mine. Galen, thank you. Welcome, everybody. The high-level points of the talk that I'm going to walk you through in the quick first 15 minutes is how do we kind of go through this? And it looks like I have action for sharing, so I'll do that now, and then I'll give you the slides here. Got it? All right. So what we're going to look at is how essentially does rule following take place with the community, and what are the timelines to implement those rule changes as we go. So at a high level, let's take a look at what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. Just like all elections in the past, the point of this is to give ample time to review it, to go over the documentation, and ask questions of the governance team of the community. So between now and January 20th, is essentially that open period for submitting your applications. As Galen mentioned, we have the GitHub issue, we have all the applications that is posted, as well as the rubric. So there's a lot of time to go get familiar with it. And so you have between now and January 20th. January 20th will be the last day to submit your essentially allocator application to come on board. And then from that, we will then rank, score, and publish all that results on the January 23rd notary governance call. Now, if for whatever reason your application was missing information or needed additional fields, that's what will take place in the next reopening, kind of a rolling period taking place in Q2. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. So what are some of the rules in this process? As was mentioned on this call earlier by KZ and by RG, was essentially that as you make this application as an allocator, things may change. So in that change, how do you set your own strategy, and then how do you make sure that that strategy is maintained by current market conditions as they go forward? Which means that each allocator will propose their own rules, and they will publish those rules in the GitHub application. It will be very public, just like before, and the community should be able to take a look at this and provide feedback and give input as this goes forward. This means that this will be an ongoing process, constantly looking at how well is this working for each allocator, as well as the community overall. So step one is that you will file this GitHub application. Step two is that it will all take place in scoring an Airtable. Step three is that at the whole time, the community is leaving feedback on the allocator application, making sure that it works, that it's staying up to date, that it's actually being implemented. Step four is when that score is published, each allocator can then see where they rank, give feedback on ways to make their application more strong. And then step five in this application process is that it's put on GitHub. So throughout this whole process, allocator applications are going to receive feedback from not only other allocators, but the community and the governance team as well. So what are the timelines? Just to reiterate, January 23rd is when all the new allocators will be announced on the governance call. And then between the 23rd and Lunar New Year, we're going to allocate time to get all those allocators on board with the program. Again, if at any time in this process you apply to be an allocator and there was something critical or not addressed in your application or you had to work on, this won't be a one and done like last time where you had to wait a whole year. It just means once we get the tooling up, we hope to make this a rolling application period, which means as you are ready to become an allocator, you could submit this. And that'll kick off in Q2, that rolling application that you can then go forward. For those of you that come to the notary governance call, the second call, we have rolled out a translator service. So as we talk, the conversation is translated real time. We're doing some more polling to see value, but we're going to try to roll that out here in the application window. So if there is any kind of language questions, this should make it a little bit easier on you to kind of get the answers you need. So again, we're working on translated versions for the rubric and translated versions for the application. Just a very friendly note, we still request that you still submit in English, just to make sure that we're capturing the true feedback of what you're saying without the translation back and forth. If you need support, Galen mentioned this earlier, office hours and lots of opportunities to go through. So we do the notary governance call. This happens every other week. So the next notary governance call will take place on the 21st. Today we're doing the lab week update. And then for the 5th and 19th of December, we'll allocate specific time in the notary governance call for any application questions or allocator questions or more deep dives. So that way you'll have plenty of opportunity as a community to discuss in an open forum anything that might be top of mind, as well as obviously you have GitHub that can go through. GitHub is our primary tool of communication just because it's so nice to tie these back to applications. So I stress this again, if you are communicating, GitHub is the most effective way to leave a comment on an issue. And it's still, when your changes from the Notary 4 to 5 election, nothing's changing. Just fill out your GitHub application and you'll be all set. While we're talking about communication, just looking forward, the code of conduct in Slack is going to be something that we're going to be looking for allocators to see about admins and stepping into. So right now, the code of Slack needs to be monitored by not just the admins, the governance team, but by the community itself. Just remember, we're looking to make this a community-friendly, harassment-free space. And we're going to really step that up as we look forward to having like this policy where how do we bring in community members to help moderate this? So this isn't just like a one voice, but it's like, this is our space. This is our way to communicate. So we're looking at third-party open moderation tools. We'll be looking for allocators and members of the community to step in on this. So look forward to more updates on the communication with the Slack as we go forward. So with that, thank you so much for your time. We're looking forward to your applications for the January 23rd. If you have any questions, here's the chat link for it. Thanks.
Phenomenal. Thank you, K-Ray. Thanks for joining. I think it's like 3 a.m. where he is. So at this point, we will kick it over to open Q&A. So we'll see if there are questions from the audience. And then we also have someone manning our form in the back. If we could get a mic over to my guy, Simon. Thank you. Simon, what are we hearing in the Google form?
Yeah, we got a few questions. Because this was a lot of information, maybe we can talk a little bit more about the application and the process. One person raised that the allocator seems like a lot of work. How can we best encourage the best folks to apply?
Yes, it is potentially going to be a lot of work. And I think this is also touching on sort of the question that Molly was bringing up earlier, where how do we engage community members that maybe are not at the level of building an entire pathway? I think that is something that we are still curious about, and how can we implement that maybe middle of next year. For encouraging people to apply, we have already heard from a number of teams that are really interested in building these pathways. I think that there is a lot of need for this, and I think there's a lot of demand for owning their own destiny. These are people that are already engaging in some kind of business development for the Filecoin ecosystem. Maybe these are data preparers, and they don't necessarily want to go through the existing eFil or open large data set pathway because they don't want to do that overhead, don't know how it would work, don't have those connections. Those teams are encouraged to propose building their own pathway, and maybe they will scope, we are only going to work with a small subset of clients. And so while the application may seem like a lot of work, or building this pathway may seem like a lot of work, you have the ability to propose a smaller lane. This organization could say, we are going to work with clients that fit this very tight band. We are not going to take any type of client that shows up and applies for data cap. We are only going to work with our own business development relations because we have built this type of data integration. So there are different ways where you could scope down. I think there's also a lot of interest in the monetization. I think that by finding new ways for these teams and organizations to say, we are providing a service to the network, we're going to make this not just be a cost center. I think that will also incentivize teams to come do this extra work. But unknown, I think that as we go through the application process, we may get feedback from people. And as we start to ratify these notaries, we may see out of that pool of existing all the way up to V4 notaries, which ones did we lose? Do we need to go back and re-engage them? What does that look like? What does it look like for a group of notaries to propose something that looks like the LDN process as it exists? So I think there's a lot of ways to engage more. If the application is too daunting, come talk to us. Talk to the Filecoin Plus team. Let us know. Come to the governance calls. Find us in Slack. Hopefully that answers that question. Simon, what else you got for me?
Are you going to have or call this application and change a FIP process for the Fil Plus program?
Yes, this is something that has come up a number of times. As I understand it, and I have been wrong before, this would not require a FIP. This is not a technical change to the code, and it is not a significant departure from FIP 0003 as it is written. The only change that we may make would be some copy edits into that FIP, but it would not be a new FIP to replace FIP 0003 because we are still taking organizations that want to be trusted fiduciaries of the Filecoin Plus program who are performing a service of diligence to verify that clients are in scope and that we are awarding data cap to those clients using transparent mechanisms, and that data cap is still being allocated and sealed in deals, which modifies the QAP. The FIP as it is written is pretty broad, and I encourage all of you that are curious to go read it. It's not very long. And I don't think that we are making enough of a departure from that where we would need to make changes. We have been adding in this new word of allocator and calling them allocator pathways. But they are still functionally notaries. And as far as the code is concerned, it is still a notary table, the on-chain, that address would be a notary, a verified notary, and it would follow the same set of rules of getting data cap from the root key holder F80 address, being able to send that data cap to an initialized client, and that client being able to utilize that data cap in a deal. That set of tooling does not change. So in that way, I don't think that we need a FIP. Could be wrong. Next.
I think we should take some live questions.
Are there any live questions? Will, you got any questions for us on how this is going to impact the work that you do? Are you excited to become an allocator pathway yourself? I think you could do it. It'd be great. The retrieval team defining their own parameters for what qualifies for data cap.
I think one question here, especially when thinking about whether it's worthwhile to spin up a team to administrate an administrator pathway, is if you're doing that, is there a clear sense of what cut you should be taking or what your incentive / reimbursement for running that allocator pathway is? So do you get a benefit that comes separately, or do you do it by getting to decide you're doing a tax, and then it's what tax these various clients are willing to pay to get applications through?
Yeah, I think that it is both. And I think that one of the things around what is the incentive, if you are a partner in the ecosystem who is building a set of tooling that, for example, you're a team like Lighthouse, and you are building a desktop client that says, we will perform diligence by finding our users. They need to register with us to download our software. So we have verified that they are a real user. They are dragging and dropping their files into our software. We are checking that against some set of algorithms. We are doing the data prep. We are sharding it, and then we are partnering with SPs. And maybe Lighthouse is going to say, we're going to do zero-cost deals and deliver that data directly to our chosen set of SPs, and Lighthouse is putting the data cap on it. Lighthouse now doesn't need to go through another notary or direct their clients. Lighthouse owns that end-to-end pathway that says, we did client diligence as part of being a piece of software. We checked the data as part of preparing it. We sharded it and split it as part of decreasing this closed loop Sybil, and we programmatically distributed it to meet our distribution requirements of regions or SP owner operators. And as a result, we just bake in the data cap part. So the advantage to doing that is now they don't need to direct clients to go someplace else to get that data cap. They don't need to go someplace else to get it for their clients. And they could then have leverage with the SPs that they're partnering with to say, all of our deals that are coming to you programmatically have already been verified. And you don't need to direct people, and you don't need to open yourself up to these different disputes because we have split the data so we know it can meet various regional requirements or program guidelines. So in that way, if you're an ecosystem partner, you can start to see, I can now decrease external reliances by being the distributor of that data cap myself. Let's see if there are some other questions live, or we'll kick it back to Simon for another one. Paul might have one. I see his head bobbing around back there.
Yeah, I had put it in the QR chat, open QA extension. Anyway, my question is specifically, I'm an employee of Filecoin Foundation, and I want to become an allocator. Or my company, I have a company, can that become an allocator? So it's twofold, right? Can employees be allocators? If let's say the registered entity is FF, or can they become allocators with their own company outside of FF or PL or wherever?
Yeah, I think as far as like the Filecoin Foundation, we are looking into the Filecoin Foundation becoming an allocator pathway in a number of ways. One of them being the social impact team. They may apply to be an allocator, and it would be primarily managed by employees of Filecoin Foundation or exclusively managed by existing employees. They would work potentially with social impact or FFDW project partners or other data owners that fit a set of criteria, and then they would be the arbiters in performing that diligence, awarding that data cap, managing that client experience, and connecting them to storage providers that could meet their SLA needs. And so in that way, the Filecoin Foundation may run a pathway. Someone who is an employee of the Filecoin Foundation, like Danny O'Brien, may also choose to be a notary, and he may say, I am going to work purely at very low scale with stopgap allocations for people that are just getting started and they have yet to get approved by another pathway, and here's my diligence form, I've done this before, and I'm just going to devote a couple hours a week to doing it, and he may act as a sole pathway to distribute small amounts of data cap by taking GitHub application forms, performing diligence on them, and checking their downstream behavior. And he may say, I will not award subsequent allocations. I will only give small allocations while people are finding an open data set or an enterprise or another pathway to work with. And so in that way, we may see individuals as well as working groups at these different organizations stand up different pathways. We have said it before, I will say it again, the thing that we care about is transparency. We care about transparency and consistency. It becomes really difficult for us to manage these communications and the disclosures when someone says, oh, my name is Paul, and I'm at this organization. And it's like, well, you're at that organization, but you are also a representative of this other FF, you're also on this other working group, you're also in this other part of the ecosystem, and it becomes hard for us to know those different overlaps and in what hat are you wearing when you communicate with us. And so when you make those things clear and you just say, I have this role at the foundation, I have this role in this other team, I have a private company that I'm the CEO of, and I'm contracted by this other group, then it helps disambiguate who we're talking to. And that makes it a lot easier for us to understand Paul is now wearing this hat, and so when we're having these comms with him, this is who we're talking to. And that becomes, difficult in different language barriers and in different regions. But all of these ecosystems, not exclusive to Filecoin, people are playing lots of roles, right? PL shows all those different logos. All of those different logos have staff and employees that have moved from company to company, or they contract with one or the other one, and you'll talk to one of them and their email address will change, and suddenly they're at a different organization. And you're like, oh, is this a new conflict of interest? Who am I talking to? Is this a different person? So it is reasonable for us to have a really tightly meshed web of interactions. We just ask for those things to be made transparent and disclosed.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes. Other questions? All right. It's been a very long day. I appreciate all of you guys sticking through it. A big round of applause to the Filecoin Plus team, our AV team, the Lab Week team, everybody that has been able to attend. Thank you all so much for coming. Look forward to taking more questions and hearing from you at the governance calls. Find us in Slack, and have a great rest of your lab week. Thank you.